Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with the managing partner of the prestigious immigration law firm that made global waves this past summer by spinning off their non-U.S. assets and operations to one of the 4 largest CPA firms in the world. Just a reminder, the PDF transcript of this audio is available to download. Go to liongrouprerecruiting.com/podcast. As many of you know, we interview corporate defense, law firm leaders, partners, general counsels, and legal consultants. You are listening to episode 27 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States. Enjoy a front row seat with law firm leaders, their partners, and legal consultants as we discuss life and leadership.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jeremy Fudge, managing partner of Appleman Leiden. Jeremy provides both leadership and operations for a nationally and globally ranked immigration law firm. They have 140 attorneys and over 800 additional professionals with 9 U.S. offices. He recently just completed a first-of-its-kind strategic alliance with Deloitte UK and sold its non-U.S. operations and assets to Deloitte Global. Prior to BAL, he was an associate at what was the Dallas-based Jenkins & Gilchrist. Jeremy calls the Dallas Metro home and received his JD from the University of Texas School of Law. Welcome, Jeremy, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here with you.
So, Jeremy, again, really appreciate your availability. I know we've been trying to get this scheduled, and you guys got a lot going on. So I want to jump right in. The thing that's definitely hit the press wire over the past 6 months, 5 months, has been this dynamic with your firm, globally ranked, nationally ranked immigration law firm, with Deloitte. Can you give us some background and how this happened? Was this a brainchild of 20 years in advance, or was it something that just kind of creeped up on you the past couple of years?
It was more in the last few years. I think both Deloitte UK and BAL were both looking at the same things in the marketplace. What clients are wanting more and more of, why we were winning or losing RFPs, all that sort of thing, and reaching really the same kind of conclusions, albeit coming from different vantage points, obviously, and with different goals in mind for it. We went into it very much, immigration, corporate immigration, which is what we specialize in, is fairly unique practice within law. And our client is a corporate client, a company, Fortune 500 company, who is typically signing a contract with us for several years. And in that time period, we will handle any of their 4 nationals who are needing to relocate from one country to another, expatriate assignments, business travel, things of that kind of nature. And so within that kind of scope, what we do is we see a lot of the broader mobility, global mobility side of things at a company. That typically includes tax, expatriate tax, relocation, and immigration. So we're 1/3 of that global mobility program for a company. Within that context, then, we see more and more companies, whether clients or potential clients, really wanting to tie together those 3 branches as close as they can. Their employees going through an experience of relocating, let's say, from one country to another. And if all 3 vendors are asking for the guy's passport, not the greatest kind of experience. Lots of other examples of that, but that's an easy one. So we saw that trend kind of more and more developing. We certainly saw the fact that all 4 of the big 4 were getting into immigration and had set up practices in Canada to deal with the U.S. market. That has been their traditional way of handling it. We, on the other hand, were looking at the market, and with the big 4 and a couple other competitors having lots and lots of offices all over the world, we had a handful of offices covering regional, broad-based touches to it. But to think through the strategy of what does it look like to open, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 more offices around the world, that's fairly daunting to think about it as a mid-sized law firm like ourselves. So it made a lot of sense kind of looking at what the market's doing, where we need to go, what do we need to do to be competitive. I think the other big piece of it is just simply clients more and more are wanting the strategic, the higher value kind of advice and work. The transactional part of our practice, which is filing the applications with the various government agencies, that's kind of table stakes almost at this point. And so Deloitte or any of the big four, they have tremendous experience and depth already built around, consulting, advisory, the broader mobility services, et cetera. So all of that's kind of what we were seeing in the market and made sense to look at this and consider it.
Who approached who? Who started the conversation?
They actually reached out to us initially and started the conversation.
You don't have to answer this question, but were you approached or did other big accounting firms get involved in this? Was there a bid off? Did you guys talk to any of the other big shops?
Over the course of the last few years, we've talked to several folks, yeah. So we've had a sense of the marketplace and who we would want to do something with or not do something with and sort of our own value, et cetera.
Why Deloitte then? Why did you land with Deloitte?
Well, it starts first and foremost, I think, with people. And we felt really aligned, both in terms of how we think about the market and how we think about this practice of immigration and those kinds of things, but also just as far as how we look at people in our own organizations and what we're trying to do. And, Deloitte is huge on stewardship. They use that word a lot, and I love that word. And so just culturally, it felt like a really good mesh right from the very, very first conversations, and that only blossomed and developed further.
That's excellent. I imagine integration in a transition like this takes time. I mean, it's interesting because we hear plenty of, say, acquisitions or combinations in the law firm world, but to see, in essence, a law firm spin off a whole division or an entire non-U.S. assets and operations, I mean, that whole process sounds like a tremendous undertaking. How has it been to do this transaction, to do the dance of due diligence and exploring this process, and then looking at taking critical employees and operations that were, almost like family to you guys probably, and give them away to another professional service firm? How has that worked for you guys?
Yeah, you're hitting exactly on it. I mean, we spent probably equal amounts of time on all of the business side of it all, and the contracts and the due diligence and the negotiation and everything else that goes with that, as we did on the people side. That was really important from the very beginning to both of us. We had about 170 people outside the U.S. that were part of the transaction. And so, as Deloitte put it, hearts and minds was, as much on the scale as the business side. So we spent a lot of time. The whole thing was well over a year of planning and preparation. So we spent a lot of time on that. We, BAL, really looked at how will those 170 people fare in all of this. That was really, really important touch point for us through the whole thing. Are we putting them in as good or better position than they would have been or are with BAL? And we felt like that answer was strongly, yes, it is good or better, and in most cases better for all those involved. And so we felt good as we got closer and closer to the date that was going to be the actual reality. And when we got to the point of telling our employees, both in the U.S. and abroad, about the deal and the situation and what's to come and so forth, we felt really good about it, and I think it went over really well. We had basically every single one of those 170 join, and everyone's thriving in their new environment now.
That's excellent. That's that's exciting. So, Jeremy, as law partners, it's always a dream of theirs is to build something and sell it. But most of the time, most legal assets are not sellable per se, but you guys have done that, which, understanding the business model, you guys have a reoccurring revenue stream. It's probably fairly predictable. And is it safe to say that the equity owners of BAL had a payoff?
Well, I think that for us, it was never really about, a payoff or any of that. We were really focused more on the future. Yeah. And we felt like what we could gain in terms of business development, new clients, the future revenue stream far outweighed our consideration in the current present realities of it all. So that's always been our focus.
Sure. So I would assume that's the answer is yes, that there was some financial incentive for you guys that was beneficial.
Well, we didn't give it away, so yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So let me ask you another question then, and I've got a couple in mind, but was there ever a point for you and your team to say, nah, we're going to just do this ourselves? Or did you guys go into this knowing this was going to work out?
We certainly didn't go into it knowing it was going to work out. It's no pun intended, it's foreign territory, right? No one's done anything like this, really, to my knowledge.
Yep.
So There was a lot to it. There was a lot of complexity. We were in Brazil, South Africa, Mozambique, England, UAE, Singapore, China, Australia. That's a lot of different jurisdictions to be figuring out, employment law, figuring out corporate law, figuring out, all the ins and outs of asset purchase and so forth and so on. So there were many times, I think, when we sort of all not pushing away from the table per se, but just kind of scratching our heads going, can we accomplish all this? Can we get all this done and get it done timely? Because that's just a lot to try to work through, right? So certainly there was those moments. There really wasn't a moment where we literally sort of pushed away from the table and said, I don't know if this is going to work. Like I said, we had such good relationships and interactions just right out of the gate with those that we were involved with, and that continued all the way through. So there was just a lot of energy and excitement, frankly, from both sides about what this could be, where it could go, what we felt like the market was really just crying out for in our particular space, which, may not be the same for other areas of law, but certainly for ours it is.
For sure. Let me ask you then, Jeremy, because you are obviously one of the architects, specifically on the law firm side. Can you provide my listeners, say, your anecdotal advice for anyone who wants to explore doing something similar, who could do something similar? Not all law firms can really do what you've just done. But what did you learn, and what advice would you give law firm executives? And truthfully, what advice would you give acquiring groups that maybe are non-law related?
It's a good question. I don't know if I've had enough time to even reflect on that answer yet. I certainly think, historically, lots of times law firms, lawyers have tried to do the business side of law, and we aren't necessarily all skilled at that. So I think certainly for us, having really good advisors along the way was critical, both within legal as well as in the non-legal aspects of it. So, don't try to row your own boat on it. I think for sure you need that input and you need that counsel and wisdom. I think, every transaction is obviously going to be different. The international, flair to this certainly made it complex. And so, you would want to certainly go into it knowing that this is going to take some time if you're doing something international like ours. The other big part of it to me is just understanding where your particular practice fits within the broader scheme of things, meaning, there's a lot of headlines out there about Big Four and that sort of thing right now. And, that may be true for some practice areas, but for some it may not be. And so for us, that certainly was the case. There wasn't quite the same concern about the takeover or the, moving into our space kind of concepts that are out there right now. It was really more about people who do similar work. Deloitte in the UK is a law firm. So, it was a law firm, talking to a law firm. And that made sense for our practice area. So I think, it's easy to kind of discount ideas sometimes because they seem too hard or they seem too maybe controversial. But I think if you take the time to really understand yourself and your own practice and your own firm, you can make wise decisions.
Yeah, excellent. Let's pivot a little bit. So just in the same line of thought, you now have an alliance with Deloitte. What does that look like? What are you guys hoping to achieve with that?
Well, we hoped and we feel like we are already in just a handful of months, really redefining the industry and the market for our services. The way it works is a client company will come to us and they will need the whole world serviced as part of their mobility program. And so if it is someone who's needing U.S. immigration services, then we're going to handle that. And if it's somewhere outside of the U.S., then Deloitte's going to handle that. We're working in a common technology system, which is our own proprietary system. And so the client's able to have their entire program in one system and know what's going on and see what's happening on each case and run reports and all that kind of good stuff. So it's really a simplistic model in a sense, and that was always the goal in all of our work and discussions was how do we make this simple for the market? And we feel like we really achieved that, and I think the market's reacting very positively in that way.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's exciting. So was that in the cards at the same time as the acquisition occurred, or was it like a secondary kind of point? Okay.
100%. It was, we wouldn't have done one without the other. Oh. That was the key strategy to it all.
Yeah. That's exciting. I love it. So obviously there's a momentum going on here, and you couldn't have happened to notice that the team you guys picked up, a very large team you picked up in New York. Was that because of momentum, or has that been in the works as well as you've been entertaining and opening an office in New York?
It was right in between the line there. We had been looking at New York and thinking about New York for a number of years, and it was a matter of finding what we felt like were the right group of people. That certainly dovetailed really nicely, though, with this, because Deloitte UK has a number of financial service clients in New York, and so being able to be on the ground physically and be able to look at taking on work from those clients, it was really important to be there. So it aligned really nicely, and the timing was really good.
It's a fairly large acquisition on that side. 60 people. I imagine the integration and the opening of an office like that requires quite an undertaking.
Yeah, we've taxed and overtaxed our operations groups this year for sure in all of this. But yeah, it was a smaller group actually when we started, by probably a dozen people, and as they've continued to enjoy success themselves at Epstein Becker, they kept adding, and we were okay with that. So ended up at 61 or 2 or some number like that. But yeah, it's been good and got them settled now. We're actually finishing the space, which will let them have some elbow room, which they don't have currently. And Epstein Becker was really good and professional about the whole situation, and a little bit unique, probably. Lots of times I think groups or lawyers just sort of leave in the cover of darkness. And
right.
Our main partner there, Bob Groban, had told Epstein his plans a while back, and they were in agreement for various strategic reasons on their side as well. And so it was out in the open. How do we help each other? How do we work on this together? That kind of a deal. So it was really, really positive in that sense.
Oh, wow. So it's collaboration with those departures almost.
Yeah.
Fascinating. You guys didn't acquire them. Was it just a lateral move, or was it more of a transaction?
Yeah, it was a lateral move. No transaction.
Interesting. Okay, fascinating. Again, with momentum going on, you announced the Center of Excellence in Richardson, Texas, or a suburb of Dallas, and you're looking to double the footprint there, almost by people-wise. Tell me about that, because I understand that you guys were on the search for an operations location to increase, technology and human resources and a number of things. Mm-hmm. How long have you guys been looking to do this?
We started a couple years back, actually, and we did the normal kind of market study I think a lot of firms have done lately, looking at, a number of cities all over the U.S. and evaluating those kind of factors that are important, particularly for us, which is hiring and what universities are in the area, what kind of transportation do we have, cost of living, certainly, all those kinds of things. So, ran that whole kind of test, and we had a number, 3 or 4 cities probably that were fairly close, and one of them was Richardson, where we had a small little sub office from our main Dallas uptown area office. And so because we were already here, because we had, that base already built, it made sense to kind of, the tiebreaker went to Richardson. So landed on Richardson, and we moved in March with about 220 people. And as of last Monday, we were at 441 already. So
wow,
it's going crazy.
Wow, that's gangbusters. So I have to just ask, and you could share as much as you little on this, but I noticed that you guys were looking at Raleigh, North Carolina, Kansas City, Missouri, and then also Houston. Any color on those cities and why either you chose to do it or not to look at those?
Not too much color, really. They were all good options in different ways, and there was a couple others in there. Houston, being in Texas, obviously fairly close in terms of a lot of those variables.
Yep.
But the particular space we ended up in, we're a stone's throw literally from major university. We're just another stone's throw from the airport. We're right in the middle of a lot of people. We're a mile probably or less from the new State Farm's headquarters here, and Raytheon's headquarters. So it was a really ideal spot, just kind of physically, that fit a lot of those other factors in. So it became an obvious choice for those reasons.
Yeah, it's interesting. If I might just belabor a little bit in this. So Amazon, obviously they announced their headquarters too, Dallas being one of the finals.
Yeah.
And they ended up landing on 2 locations because of actual access to talent. Mm-hmm. Was access to a talent pool like a really driving factor?
Yeah, it was for sure. Our practice is fairly unique in law because we're so paralegal driven. So we tend to have, anywhere from 3 to 5 paralegals per attorney.
Okay.
So the ratios are just totally different. Obviously, then our workforce looks very different. Where we have, I don't know the number exactly, but let's call it 120 attorneys. We've got hundreds and hundreds of paralegals. So,
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. The ability to, and a lot of our employees are being hired straight out of university, first jobs, that sort of thing. So it's unique in that sense compared to most law firms and the kind of people they're needing to hire.
Yeah, super. Well, I want to go back to just what's happening of the landscape of the big 4 accounting firms encroaching on big law. Not looking for a huge answer on this, but just wanting to ask, what are you seeing? I know, so you said you had talked to a couple of big accounting firms. Deloitte wasn't the only one, but they were the best marriage partner in this. What are you hearing from the big accounting firms? And, obviously there's potential fear and trepidation going on in the news wires with, law firms needing to be aware of encroaching on competition and things like that. But how much of that is a reality? How much of, what they're intending to do or what their plans are? Can you give us some color on that?
I don't know too much as far as speaking for them on behalf of their plans, but I can tell you, I think, we saw fairly quickly after our alliance, one of our competitors did something similar, albeit I would argue very, very different, with another big 4.
Okay.
So, someone going first in a sense, I think is an element of that. But I think, the biggest thing to me with all of that kind of talk, frankly, is, competition to me has always been a good thing, right? Like it brings out the best in you. So where I saw Deloitte in this case, let's say, really getting into the immigration space, building out a practice globally, doing some really cool, exciting things in our space and bringing innovation to the forefront of it. To me, that was not a threat. That was a opportunity. And so to say, hey, let's align on this stuff and let's share our common views of where things could go in the future and all that, like that's a good thing. And it drove us to be better. And, today even drives us to be better. So that's my view on it. I'm more, maybe ambitious or excited in that sense about the future.
That's excellent. I appreciate that response. Another subject that you and I had discussed and I wanted to get into, which was your leadership and your excitement around technology. And what I want to talk about is the future of law. What are you guys doing? And what do you see for the future of law as it relates to technology and other things coming out?
We're doing really, really cool stuff. It's maybe the most exciting thing to me and my fellow partners about our practice and, what today even looks like and certainly what the future looks like. Like I said earlier, our practice is very transaction heavy. So you're filling out lots of forms, lots of letters that get filed with different government agencies, that sort of thing. And so it's an area that's certainly ripe for bringing technology into it, finding efficiencies and delivering better quality and better service ultimately. So we've done a lot in that area already in terms of robotics and automation and driving some of that process forward those ways versus just the good old human, muscle. We have a lot in terms of.
I'm gonna pause you on that. Did you say robotics?
Yeah, I did.
See, you guys are using robots instead of human beings?
Robotic functions, yeah. We don't have, Rosie the robot sitting in a chair, but yeah, that's employed in the technology we have.
So it's a form of AI is what you're describing.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Just curious. Keep on going. Sorry.
So that's exciting. It's a very paper practice still with the government. So They send you a receipt notice back in paper form. They send you an approval notice in paper form, et cetera. So looking at ways of automating that part of it and using OCR and bringing the data into the system that way and so forth. And then you've got, just sort of these other areas that are on our roadmap that we're just starting to get into in terms of chatbots and in terms of travel assessment tools and things like that again, it's just sort of embracing where we're going as a society and trying to align that and keep that up. But that's the biggest thing I think too with our practice that's a little unique from many others, which is we're dealing with individuals of those companies, employees of those companies who are going through a process, and their mindset in a lot of ways is no different than when they're going on Amazon to order something or they're going on to, whatever other thing to do something. So it's an area that's just ripe in that sense for keeping up with what's happening in the world around us. And that's a lot of our benchmarks, frankly. We look at, an Amazon, for example, and say, what are they doing? How are they making the service experience better for someone when they're purchasing something? How does the app work? In our technology, we have a mobile app. And so, what's that experience look like? And is it akin to it, or are they going through immigration process and saying, gosh, this feels like 1980 compared to what my real life is like, right? So it's a lot of that for us, which I think is, fairly unique within law generally.
I would say so, absolutely. So I'm assuming the technology you're deploying, it's not out of box, it's more custom made, and you have programmers inside the company. Is that correct?
That's correct. We started building our own systems in 1997.
Okay, wow.
And have had our own proprietary system since then.
Oh, wow. So everything you guys do is in-house, or do you have other outside contractors that work for you?
We do sub out some of the work to other programmers and such, but we do have in-house development team as well as all the other product management and quality assurance and other groups.
Yeah. Is it safe to say that some of the work that you guys are doing is kind of like a H&R Block approach to getting the stuff done? It's very form-filling and efficiencies and things like that make the process easier.
Yeah. The core practice, since its inception has been about getting those forms completed, et cetera. So in a lot of ways, for many years, we took the approach of, how do we take Intuit's TurboTax and do that for immigration?
Right.
What I think has shifted more is where that's becoming almost table stakes to companies. Yeah, anybody can fill out that form. What else can you do? Kind of mindset.
Right.
And I think that's where it's driven us to say, okay, we need to make a shift here in two ways. One, how do we provide more strategic advisory consultant type services, which is part of the Deloitte UK Alliance. And then the other is, because this is not considered, the artful practice of law it used to be to fill out this form, which admittedly it still is, and it's given short shrift, I think, frankly. But because of that kind of general vibe, how do we maximize that, right? So it can't eat up a huge chunk of our costs anymore. We've got to get it to where it's as profitable, as efficient, as high quality as we can get it. So.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's fun to look at a law practice like yours because it's treated truly like a business, but you do have consultancy service fees and things like that. It's more bespoke. So business operations guys or consultants or folks like yourself can really get in there and drive efficiency. Let's pivot to another subject that you mentioned you're passionate about earlier to me was talk to us about people, culture, and the mission statement of BAL.
I am passionate. It's a big reason why I do what I do. And I think for a lot of lawyers, at least happy ones, it's probably why they do what they do. And they've found their own mission in that as well. Our mission statement is to provide an experience that makes a positive difference in people's lives. And what I love about our mission statement is it doesn't talk about immigration. It doesn't talk about law. It just talks about providing an experience that makes a positive difference in people's lives. And so we talk about that in three buckets. First one is the people being our own people, and starts and ends there in a lot of ways. If we're treating our people well, if we're taking care of them, if we're developing them, if we're looking out for them, they're going to give a great experience to our clients. So from a business standpoint, it makes a ton of sense. But just from the standpoint, especially for me personally, I feel like that is my calling. That is my mission, is to serve and to steward all these different people that are putting their trust and their careers in our hands. So that's a huge part of it. But then you move on, and the second group of people is the corporate client themselves. That's an HR director usually, or an immigration program manager, someone like that. And we're trying to be an extension of their team. We're trying to be their trusted advisor, their right hand, kind of make them look good to the C-suite, especially right now. These are rocky times in immigration with the current administration. So giving them confidence and a sense of calm in all of this. And so how do we do that and provide them that positive experience? And then on to the foreign national themselves. And that's, in a sense, with immigration law, that's the easy one. You've got someone who's moving from one place to another, or they're trying to pursue permanent residency in the U.S. And, you've got jobs and families, at stake. And it's a serious business in that sense. So how do we provide them the same level of calm and take away their anxiety and make a positive difference in their life? So it's a really fulfilling area of law, I think. And I had no clue it existed when I was in law school, but found my way into it. And for me, I think for most of us that work here, it's certainly, a higher calling in a lot of ways.
Jeremy, you are a leader of leaders. You are providing leadership, vision, passionate mission for people. Would you share with my audience formative experiences or one experience in your life that led you to develop leadership within you? What happened in life that provided you to grow in leadership?
I think there's, a number of things I could point to. Certainly the biggest one in a lot of ways, I think, is my own dad. He had a very just fascinating in a lot of ways life, and just passed away a year ago at Thanksgiving last year.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
And he instilled in me through all of his journey through life and different jobs and everything else, a real sense of that people piece, and that's driven by our own Christian faith, but just really seeing it as stewardship, and you've got opportunities, you've got talents, you've got people, you've got resources, and how do you employ those wisely, and how do you be a good steward of those things? So I think that drives me in a lot of ways. His example and the lessons that I learned explicitly and implicitly both through him being my dad for all those years. So.
It's awesome. It's an awesome legacy. And again, I'll just say I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your dad. I know it's a year ago, you said.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. And definitely, for good or for bad, our parents have a dramatic effect on our lives. So it's awesome to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me share, and again, you can share little, you can share as much as you'd like, but so you were a part of a firm that actually had been in the news and had actually dissolved back in when you were in Dallas, your original firm out. Would you share a little bit about that story? Because you left that firm, as far as I understand, and you became a part of BAL Appleman after that. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. So I actually started my career for almost 2 years at Jackson Walker, and then switched over to Jenkins. Was there about 5 years, 2002 to 7. I was a senior associate at the time in 2007 and 2006, and so wasn't privy to a whole lot of the information or details of what was happening or, so forth. But I think the two partners of our practice area knew what was going on and saw, in a sense, the writing on the wall. And so they started looking at other options and back in, 2006. And even at the time then, BAL was a very innovative, at the forefront firm. And, like I said, they had proprietary technology for 10 years at that point. So cultural fit, all those other similar things to the Deloitte UK thing, everything kind of lined up. So we left Jenkins in February of 2007 with about 40 people in tow. And I believe Jenkins ceased doing business in like May of that year, something like that. So we left just prior to it stopping.
Wow. To clarify for the audience, what sunk the firm was a tax structure fraud?
Again, I don't even know exactly the details. I do know it related to tax opinions.
Yeah.
And they were written out of, I think, Chicago office. It was another office besides Dallas, which was the main office. And part of the settlement agreement, I believe, was effectively going out of business.
So it was a professional liability problem that took the firm out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that. Let's transition to kind of more personal questions. Obviously that was a personal one, but I wanted to ask, so are you Texas native?
Almost. I was born in Alabama, and we lived there until I was almost 7 and then moved to Texas.
Okay. Very good. And it's been the whole Dallas area for most of your career?
Yes. I grew up in Houston, went to Baylor, and then went to UT, and then came to Dallas.
Sure. Absolutely. So if you're able to get away from work, which I'm sure you try to do, how do you and the family enjoy life away from work?
Well, I've got 4 daughters, and so ages 3 to 14 almost, and so that's pretty much it outside of the office.
Wow, I would say so. Yeah.
We really enjoy our ties with Baylor, and so we go to the football games, go to the basketball games, support Baylor in every way we can. Kids have a million activities, right? So just doing those things and running around with those. When I get some guy time, some alone time, certainly golf and music and other things like that are things I really enjoy and do.
That's excellent. Well, with 4 kids with that kind of spread, it's hard, especially as young as they still are at 3 years old. Do you and your wife try to travel and get away? I'm sure with the firm you do.
We do. We try to steal some long weekends here and there throughout the year and keep that relationship strong outside of the kids.
Yeah, that's smart. Are you a reader? I mean, I imagine you do lots of things within the firm and outside the firm, but do you find time to read?
I struggle to read, but I really do love to read and glean, insights and knowledge out of reading. So I sort of almost force myself to read. But yeah, it's part of my development of myself, I think.
Yeah. Where do you turn for that? Where do you glean insights and things to kind of keep you sharp?
I try to cover different areas. Some of it will be just business focused. Some of it will be, customer service focused. I read a great book about the Ritz-Carlton and what they do and how they do it. And, it has nothing to do, obviously, with law or immigration, but it was, helpful to pull insights out of that. There's a book we just read somewhat as a group called Extreme Ownership, which is two former Navy SEAL guys who now are business consultants, and they apply military lessons to the business world. It was really, really fascinating read, both from the sort of war story side of it as well as the business principle side of it. And we had our leadership retreat just in October and had one of their group come and speak to us, a former Navy SEAL, and it was riveting. Everyone just loved it.
That's awesome. Do you remember the title of the Ritz-Carlton book, or is it just easy to look up on Amazon?
Yeah, if you Google Ritz-Carlton service books, you probably could do it.
Great. Yeah. Anything else that's been, you can suggest for my readers to pick up and follow on to?
I mean, the one I've been working through most recently and with my coach is What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Okay.
And it's that idea of you can be a great manager and now you're in leadership and that can be different and the skills are different and how people view you is different and you have blind spots potentially. And so that was a really interesting read. And a big part of it is, that sense of a 360 or an assessment of yourself and what are your blind spots. And so I went through that process with my coach and we did a 360 in the firm among partners and operations leaders and so forth and got their inputs. And, I'm working through that with my coach. So it's been a really good book and exercise afterwards.
That's excellent. And you mentioned coach. So it sounds like you subscribe to outside input of advisors, even for yourself. Have you always had a coach?
Not always, but the last little, handful of years I have for sure. We started as a firm, really focusing on strengths finders a number of years ago. And that's led to this idea to me of, and you sort of take it for granted, but, take Michael Jordan, take LeBron James, take an Olympian, they're at the very top. They're the very best at what they do, yet they still have a coach. And so you kind of take away a little bit of the stigma as you think of coaches sometimes as like, well, there's a disciplinary issue or you got, a partner that's misbehaving and you send him to a coach versus, I want to get better and I want to improve and I want to be the best I can be at, all the things I do. And so, a coach makes a lot of sense in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a fun question. Tell me something that's true that almost nobody agrees with you on.
Something that's true, almost no one agrees. Well, I would say probably that I'm funny. I think it's true that I'm funny, but a lot of times people don't see my humor. So I think my wife would definitely agree with that, and a lot of my partners probably would.
That's awesome. Actually, let me ask you another question. This is another kind of fun spin. Room, desk, and chair, which do you clean first?
Gosh, almost none of them.
Yeah.
Probably chair.
Chair. Yep.
I had to pick. Definitely not desk.
Understand that. Jeremy, let me ask you kind of a final question as we get close to wrapping this up. With the life experience you've had, here's my question. What advice would you give yourself after graduating law school with what you know now? What advice would you give yourself?
I think in a lot of ways, how I started ended up being a blessing in disguise. I started in litigation and dabbled in immigration through some funny circumstances. And I spent 2 years doing litigation and didn't really enjoy it whatsoever. So I'm grateful for how I ended up, in essence, learning immigration the hard way myself by reading the books and the regs and just learning it. But certainly I spent 2 years that I wouldn't have otherwise had to spend and could have gotten back if I knew, in essence, this, which is, law is a big area. There's so many different practice areas. And so, it's critical as hard as you're going to work in it to focus on an area that you really have a passion for and you love. And certainly I didn't know that initially being immigration, but that is the case now. And so I think that's what's always kind of gotten me through, the hard work and the long hours and long years and everything else that goes with law, which is, really find what you love and be passionate about it. And that can drive you through that.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time on the show today.
Yeah, it's been great. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you have questions or would like to recommend someone to be on the podcast, please email them to podcast@findthelions.com. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes. Also, please share our podcast with others via email or social media. To share our podcast, listen to more shows, or to read the transcription of this audio, go to liongrouprerecruiting.com/podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.